When you think of the war in Ukraine, you probably picture this. For more than 4 years, these images of trenches and frontline combat have defined the conflict. But what if I told you the most decisive battles right now aren't being fought with tanks, but with spreadsheets? Forget the front lines for just a moment. The real war for Ukraine's future has evolved. It's now a global economic struggle, fought in diplomatic backrooms and on stock market floors. This is the story of how a war of bullets became a war of budgets, and how this new, quieter conflict will determine the ultimate victor. The initial invasion was a brutal, kinetic shock. The world watched, expecting a swift conclusion. But Ukraine held. The front lines, after those initial chaotic shifts, largely solidified into a grinding, brutal stalemate. For months, then years, the narrative remained locked on territorial gains and losses, measured in meters and villages. This was the war we all understood. But underneath this familiar surface of mud and steel, a second, more decisive conflict was taking shape. This is a war of endurance. A war of economic resilience versus financial pressure. A war of political will versus popular fatigue. Vladimir Putin's strategy has shifted. Unable to achieve a quick military victory, his new objective is to outlast the West. His bet is that before Ukraine's military breaks, the political and economic will of its allies will crumble first. This is no longer just a war between two nations. It is a direct contest between two fundamentally different systems. On one side, a centralized, authoritarian war machine. On the other, a democratic nation sustained by a complex, often fragile, global coalition. And the central question has become brutally simple. Who can afford to keep fighting? To understand this new phase of the war, you first have to grasp the sheer scale of Ukraine's economic devastation. In the first year of the full-scale invasion, the country's GDP plummeted by a catastrophic 29.1%, the largest recession in its history. While the economy has shown remarkable resilience and returned to growth in 2023 and 24, it still faces immense challenges. With a fifth of its land occupied and millions displaced, forecasters like the IMF and World Bank predict slower growth of around 2% for 2020, citing ongoing attacks and labor shortages. The numbers are staggering. In 2025, Ukraine's defense and security spending is set to consume roughly 31% of its entire GDP, one of the highest rates in the world. Yet, in an astonishing feat of fiscal survival, the Ukrainian state has not collapsed. Pensions and wages are still being paid. Hospitals and schools remain open. How is this possible? The answer lies not in Kyiv, but in Brussels, Washington, and other allied capitals. Ukraine is running on an external lifeline. The country's own tax revenue is not enough to fund its military, let alone its civilian obligations. International support has been monumental. Since the war began, the European Union and its member states have provided over $122 billion in combined financial, humanitarian, and emergency assistance alone. Crucially, much of this has come in the form of grants and highly concessional loans, designed to keep the state afloat without burying it under a mountain of debt. Programs like the EU's new $50 billion Ukraine facility, which runs from 2024 to 2027, are the lifeblood of the Ukrainian government, enabling it to continue functioning as a sovereign entity. This support network has had to adapt. When political headwinds shifted in the United States, creating uncertainty, Europe stepped forward to fill the void. The result has been a fundamental restructuring of how Ukraine is funded. turning the EU into the primary guarantor of Ukraine's economic survival. On the other side of the ledger, Russia presents a facade of stability. The Kremlin has re-engineered its economy onto a war footing, and surprisingly to many, its GDP has continued to grow. However, beneath the surface, the sanctions are biting and the long-term costs are mounting. The headline growth is misleading. The economy isn't booming, it's distorting. While the IMF projects growth of around 1.1% for 2026, this is largely fueled by colossal state spending on the military. This has boosted sectors tied to the war effort, but is hollowing out the rest of the economy. This massive spending, combined with sanctions, has fueled inflation and forced Russia's central bank to keep interest rates punishingly high, which chokes off investment and sustainable growth. Most critically, the Kremlin is burning through its rainy day fund. Russia's National Welfare Fund, a financial cushion built up over years from oil and gas profits, is being steadily depleted to cover massive budget deficits. While reports of its imminent exhaustion were premature, the fund's liquid assets have been significantly drawn down from their pre-war peaks. In January 2025, the fund's total value stood at nearly 11.9 trillion rubles, about 117 billion US dollars, down from over 13 trillion rubles just a month earlier. Economists have warned that at the current rate of spending, the fund faces serious strain. The war is also draining Russia of its most valuable resource, its people. Hundreds of thousands have been mobilized or have fled the country, creating severe labor shortages that are crippling industries not related to the war. This demographic pressure, combined with the technological blockade from sanctions, is mortgaging Russia's long-term economic future. Russia isn't just fighting a war in Ukraine. It's fighting a war against its own economic and demographic decline. Perhaps the most significant evolution of this war has not been on the battlefield, but in the halls of power in Washington and Brussels. The united front that characterized the early years of the conflict has been tested, revealing a change in dynamics between the United States and Europe. After the 24 election, the US approach to aid shifted, creating significant uncertainty. While aid committed by the previous administration continued to flow, new, large-scale funding packages faced major political hurdles. In late 2025, Congress approved a defense bill that included only $400 million in new weapons funding for Ukraine for 2026-2027. A symbolic amount compared to the tens of billions approved in previous years. This American hesitation sent shockwaves through Kyiv and European capitals. For Russia, it seemed to validate Putin's strategy of waiting out Western resolve. But it also triggered an unexpected and powerful reaction. Instead of collapsing, the European pillar of support solidified and grew stronger. Faced with a less predictable American partner and a more aggressive Russia, Europe has undergone a generational shift in its approach to security. It has effectively stepped up to become Ukraine's main financial backer. One of the most dramatic moves was the establishment of the EU's $50 billion Ukraine facility, a multi-year program of loans and grants designed to provide stable, predictable funding through 2027. This package was a monumental statement of intent, ensuring the Ukrainian state could continue to function and its military could continue to fight. This moment marked a clear transfer of leadership on Ukraine's financial stability from Washington to Brussels. While the US remained a critical military partner, the EU took the lead in guaranteeing Ukraine's economic survival, driven by the realization that Ukraine's fight is inextricably linked to its own security. As the economic war has intensified, both sides have been forced to innovate. For the West, the most potent and legally complex new weapon has been the move to weaponize Russia's own frozen assets. Since the invasion, about $300 billion of Russian central bank assets have been immobilized in Western financial institutions, the vast majority of which are in Europe. For years, these funds were simply frozen. But as Ukraine's financial needs grew more desperate, an audacious idea gained traction: using the profits generated by these frozen assets to fund Ukraine's defense. In mid-2024, the G7 nations agreed to a groundbreaking plan. They would engineer a collective $50 billion loan for Ukraine. Instead of confiscating the assets outright, a legal minefield, the loan is collateralized by the future interest and profits earned on Russia's immobilized money. It's a form of financial judo, using the momentum of Russia's own money against it. The windfall profits, which amount to several $billion a year, are no longer just accumulating. They are being repurposed to back a major lifeline for Kyiv. This represents a new frontier in economic statecraft. It's a clear signal that for the West, particularly Europe, all financial tools are on the table. The war is no longer just being fought on Ukrainian soil. It is being waged on the balance sheets of international clearinghouses and in the boardrooms of central banks. It's a quiet, complex battle, but its outcome could be just as decisive as any military campaign. Vladimir Putin's ultimate hope is that the democratic world will simply get tired. He is betting on war fatigue. The idea that as the conflict drags on, Western populations and their leaders will lose the will to continue making the necessary sacrifices. And there are signs that this strategy is having an effect. Public opinion across Western Europe is complex and divided. Polls have shown that while many want to see Ukraine succeed, significant portions of the population in countries like Germany, France, and Italy also favor pushing for a negotiated peace, even if it means territorial concessions. This points to a growing weariness with a long war and its associated economic costs. In Russia itself, President Putin's approval ratings have seen a decline from their wartime highs, signaling a growing frustration with the conflict now in its fifth year. However, to focus only on fatigue is to miss the other side of the story, the hardening of institutional resolve. While some public sentiment may be wavering, the core institutions of the West, particularly in Europe, have doubled down. The EU's unprecedented financial packages, like the $50 billion Ukraine facility, are not a sign of fatigue, but a declaration of long-term strategic investment in Ukraine's survival. European leaders are increasingly framing support for Ukraine not as charity, but as a vital component of their own national security. This dual reality, pockets of public fatigue existing alongside unprecedented institutional commitment, is the new psychological terrain of the war. It's a race between the erosion of popular support and the construction of durable, long-term support structures. Putin is betting on the former. Europe is investing billions to ensure the latter. Who wins this contest of wills may ultimately determine who wins the war. This new phase of the conflict is complex, and it's constantly evolving. Staying informed is more important than ever. If you want to understand the deeper dynamics shaping our world, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next analysis. So what does victory look like in a war that's no longer just about front lines? The conflict in Ukraine has transformed. The raw, brutal calculus of military might has been joined by a far more complex equation of economic endurance, political cohesion, and international will. The winner will not necessarily be the side that captures the most territory, but the side whose economic and social systems can withstand the immense, grinding pressure of a prolonged war of attrition. Ukraine is fighting for its life, powered by a river of foreign capital that is now flowing primarily from Europe. Its survival is a testament to both the courage of its people and the strategic commitment of its allies. Russia, in turn, is waging a war on two fronts, one against Ukraine and another against its own long-term economic limitations. It is distorting its economy and liquidating its financial buffers to pay for its imperial present, betting that it can break Ukraine's allies before it breaks itself. The shifts in US aid and Europe's subsequent surge in support mark a pivotal moment, a realignment of transatlantic responsibility and a redefinition of European strategic autonomy. We are witnessing, in real time, a test of systems. This is the reality of 21st century warfare. It isn't just fought by soldiers, it's waged by economists, diplomats, and politicians. Its outcome is determined not only by bravery on the battlefield, but by budget deficits, interest rates, and the shifting tides of public opinion in countries thousands of miles from the fighting. The war in Ukraine isn't ending. It has evolved into a global struggle for endurance, and its final chapter will be written not just in blood and iron, but in spreadsheets and balance sheets.